In 1947, a ship crammed with Jewish refugees tried to land in British-controlled Palestine. She had been repeatedly rammed and boarded by the British Royal Navy.
The British dragged this ship into the harbor. It looked like a matchbox that had been crushed by a nutcracker.
The ship was chaos. The ship was, oh, what a mess the ship was. I mean, torn up, ripped up, people wounded.
I think I was very sorry for them. I mean, they'd had a hell of a time in Europe during the war, and obviously saw Palestine as the golden land, which they reckoned was theirs. I'm not surprised some of them, a lot of them tried to make it, but they took incredible risks on some of the ships to get there.
The mission failed, but in failing, it made history and hastened the creation of a Jewish state. A feature film and book romanticized events. This is the true story of a ship the world would come to know as Exodus. Baltimore, December 1946. A handful of young Americans arrived at the deserted, snow-covered pier. They got their first look at the rusty, neglected ship that would carry them all the way to the shores of Palestine. "23-year-old Bill Bernstein chronicled the mission in home movies and letters to his brother.
Dear Mo, I'm writing this letter from shipboard. A ship like none I've seen before. There's so much to describe that I don't know where to begin. But the crew, God, we have everything aboard except sailors. Everyone has a different reason for making the voyage.
Those reasons included adventure and idealism, and most of all, the horrors of the German death camps. Bernard Marx was 24 years old when he joined his first mate.
I can always talk about myself, and I wanted to save the people. That's why I came aboard.
Avi Livni was 19 years old when he told his mother he had to get involved.
Her reaction is probably not very different from that of many other Jewish mothers, probably not different from many other mothers in general. And her reaction was, why does my son have to do it? Why doesn't somebody else's son do it? And for a 19-year-old, I think it was pretty good. My answer was, because there is nobody else.
Frank Levine was working at an American air base.
I didn't tell my parents anything. I didn't tell my parents anything. I was going on an extended vacation. This was a very, very quiet thing.
The ship's mission would put them on a collision course with British rule in Palestine.
We, of course, broke the blockade. We broke the mandate. And I think we damn near broke the British Navy.
They were determined to force the British to make good their word to the Jews from 30 years before.
In 1917, Lord Allenby conquered the Holy Land, and the Jews were promised a national home in Palestine by the Earl of Balfour, a policy endorsed by Woodrow Wilson and by the League of Nations, which made Palestine a British mandate.
But in 1939, Britain was faced with war. Peace had to be maintained in the Arab states. The British produced a white paper which strictly limited the immigration of Jews into Palestine. Immigration was phased out just when the Jews needed it most. The Rosen family from Poland were captured by the Nazis in 1941 and taken to a nearby forest. Hadassa, the oldest child, was saved by her father.
אני זוכרת שהוא כן צעק, לייף מיין קינד, זה ביידיש. רוצי ילדה שלי. והתחלתי לרוץ, ונפלתי ישר. נפלתי לערוץ, זה היה יותר באדמה. וממש התחפרתי בידיים יותר כמה שאפשר, וכאילו שאני מתה. ושמעתי את היריות, ושמעתי את הצעקות, ובכי. וחשבתי, הנה שם ההורים שלי נהרגים, ואני פה לבד.
Noah Klieger was 15 when he was taken to Auschwitz.
Human language is not strong enough to explain what really happened in one of these German extermination camps. But what I can say is that all I know, all I feel, and all I realize, I have in fact learned it in Auschwitz.
Over 6 million Jews died in the Holocaust.
I had decided that should the Lord make a miracle and get me over this time, I'd become a Zionist. In other words, I had decided, or rather I had understood, that the only solution for the Jewish people would be a country of their own, an independent country where at least you can run to, when in danger, a haven.
But there was little sympathy for the 200,000 survivors of the Holocaust. Those with nowhere to go were put into camps for displaced persons. Sam Schulman, like many American Jews, wanted to help them.
Nobody wanted him. The United States did not want him. Britain, France, nobody wanted him. So there was only one place, Palestine, was ready to accept him.
America's President Truman called for the immediate admission of 100,000 Jewish immigrants to Palestine in the summer of 1945. The British were furious and refused. Clement Attlee, Britain's Prime Minister, and the Foreign Secretary, Ernest Bevin, warned the Jews not to push to the head of the queue. Both Arab and Jewish leaders were summoned to London to break the deadlock on immigration.
It's my earnest hope the way may be cleared towards some acceptable solution of this intractable problem.
But Bevin insisted on a monthly quota of only 1,500 Jewish immigrants. The Jews boycotted the conference.
In Palestine, storm center of world opinion, another shipload of refugees from Europe find a new home. Only 1,500 Jewish immigrants a month may now enter Palestine.
David Ben-Gurion, the leader of Haganah, one of the underground Jewish militias, realized he could turn the plight of the European refugees to his advantage. He secretly organized a campaign of illegal mass migration to Palestine called Aliyah. Those illegal immigrants caught by the British were sent to holding camps in Cyprus.
After World War II, the decision was made that illegal immigration would have a dual purpose. One, to rescue remaining Jewish populations in Europe, get them out because they wanted out. And number two, as an instrument of Jewish resistance against British rule as a route to statehood. And it really appealed to the Jewish leadership in Palestine at that time because it was resistance not by killing people, but by rescuing people.
For Aliyah to become a reality, large ships had to be purchased to transfer the refugees. Unlike Europe, America had a surfeit of cheap old ships, like the President Warfield. Rotting, drab, rat-infested, for $40,000 she could be saved from the scrap heap. A crew had to be found, but Aliyah was a secret society. How did you enlist?
Went into a drugstore, pulled out a phone book, and looked under J, Jewish, called the Jewish Agency.
The official line from Jewish relief agencies was, they knew nothing about Aliyah. But unofficially, they steered young American volunteers to the ships.
I'd like to get on a ship that's carrying immigrants to Palestine. They all don't know a thing about it. And then one man said, come over. What's your name? Who are you?
Some of the crew had no sailing experience.
I'd never been to sea in my life before. And the next time I go, it'll be too soon.
I climbed the ladder, and who was to greet me but a priest with a big cross on his chest and a clerical collar. This was John Stanley Grohl.
Tall, blonde, and Methodist, the Reverend John Stanley Grohl was hitching a ride on the President Warfield as an official observer for the American Christian Palestine Committee.
But I said to myself in Yiddish, ich hab gedacht, das ist ein jüdisches Schiff. Was did they do? I thought this was a Jewish ship. What's a Christian doing here?
The Haganah sent agents over from Palestine to supervise the operation. Ike Aran was just 22 at the time. His control over the ship was strictly hush-hush. Soon after his arrival, the American crew were sworn in as members of Haganah, subject to its discipline and code of secrecy.
What does shushu mean?
Shushu means shh.
Don't say anything. Silence, that's what shushu means.
But the outfitting of a four-deck steamer by a handful of foreigners and Jewish Americans was hard to keep quiet. Moses Speart was quartermaster for the operation.
It was an open secret. People knew. The Baltimore Sun asked in the paper, why is this ship here? It has Mediterranean charts, and yet it's supposed to be going to China.
On February 25th, the Baltimore Shipping News reported that the President Warfield, registered in Honduras, had departed bound for Hong Kong.
We did leave in February, and Bango hit a real full gale storm, I'd say. The superstructure was moving.
We had a wooden superstructure. The superstructure began to, with every roll, to sway 2 or 3 inches. It felt like 2 or 3 feet. We were beginning to understand why we took it out of a scrapyard.
And parts of the ship were in water waist high, and the captain, who was not Jewish, decided that we were going to abandon ship. The alarms didn't work, and Ike didn't want to abandon ship.
And the ship took a bit of water, and the captain panicked, and he called the tugboats who came with us but never even touched us, and we went back to Norfolk.
The trial run had been a disaster. Novice crewmen forgot to plug the anchor chain ports. Bilge pumps had failed, and seasickness struck down all but 6 of the 42-man crew. Press scrutiny intensified. The Warfield was labeled a mystery ship, a mystery the British easily solved. The British embassy pressured the Honduran government to revoke her registry and keep the Warfield in port. On March 29th, the Honduran consul general arrived at the dock in Baltimore to stop her leaving. But too late. The Haganah was a half step ahead. The Warfield was steaming fast for open water. The amateur crew sailed into the unknown, to what would become her place in history. The British blockade of Palestine was nearly impenetrable.
Just north of Haifa, a blockade runner is beached after the 1,000 illegal immigrants had put up a savage battle against the naval boarding party.
On the same day that the Warfield nearly sank on her trial run, the British Navy captured the Haim Arlazaroff off the Palestine coast.
These are only a few of the thousands who dashed themselves against the ironclad British blockade of the coast.
As the President Warfield crossed the Atlantic, 8 Aliyah Bet ships were stopped, and 8,000 refugees were sent to detention camps in Cyprus. The odds against the Warfield succeeding were huge. But on board, it was a pleasant, carefree cruise. Bill Bernstein wrote to his brother.
Dear Mo, the crew has finally molded into a good working bunch of seamen. I've eaten in the crew's mess hall on many a ship, but in all the time I've spent at sea, I have never heard the kind of talk I've heard here. The conversation on the average ship stems from the subject of women and various means of enjoying them. Not here. If you don't know integral calculus, at least 1/3 of the conversation at the dinner table is lost to you. If you don't know what Aristotle told his mother on his 6th birthday, and if God forbid you should know what opera played in Pittsburgh 2 years ago, or worse yet, how many calluses Yosha Heifetz has on the index finger of his left hand, you are completely ignored. You might just as well not exist. Seriously though, the crew is really catching on. Regards, Bill.
But the British had alerted the authorities in the Azores to the arrival of a Jewish blockade runner.
All the people came down to the dock. They wanted to see what a Jew looks like. And they put a gangway out from a closed deck. And John Gaul, the minister, blonde hair, blue eyes, was dressed in a clerical collar with his big cross on his chest. The people looked up at him aghast. They all thought that the Mashiach had, the Christ had come back. He looked at them and he blessed them all. He was a character actor, by the way.
From the Azores, the Warfield steamed on to its next stop, France, the port of Marseille. The chess match between the British and the Haganah was heating up. The American crew were photographed and identified by British agents, and the French authorities were pressured to impound the Warfield for sanitary violations. The Warfield was forced to slip away under cover of darkness. For weeks she steamed from port to port, staying one step ahead of British intelligence. At Porto Venere in Italy, the ship's ballroom was ripped out and converted into sleeping quarters.
This was a ship that originally carried 400 people. By the time we got through putting beds on, actually, they weren't beds, they were racks. We had room for over 4,000 people.
But they had to find somewhere that such a large number of refugees could be discreetly put on board. They chose Sète in southern France. From their tiny office in Paris, the Haganah organized the movement of Holocaust survivors out of the displaced persons camps and onto various Mediterranean ports.
We had professional smugglers. Usually they smuggled other things, but in our case we paid them to smuggle people. And of course we had bribed police, border policemen, and in customs and everything to look the other side. Of course this was done by the organization. So we brought them in by very large numbers. It was hundreds and hundreds for every one of the ships, until this big one where we had to bring in 4,500.
Well, everything was so well organized. Can you imagine all these trucks came from different countries of Europe, from different DP camps, and they all rendezvoused at the same time, the same morning in Sète.
Sète, July 9th, 1947. Dear Mo, this is it. After working, hiding, and chasing all over Europe for months, we have finally cleared the way for a 7-day voyage.
Just after sunrise, the American crew came face to face with survivors of the Holocaust.
All of a sudden, trucks started arriving. And as far as your eye can see, there were trucks. And people started getting out. And they were getting out very orderly in groups with their little knapsacks on their back.
They were wearing 3 and 4 layers of clothing with the idea that it's easier to wear your luggage than to carry it.
אונייה כזאת מסכנה, מקרשים, גדולה מאוד. וראינו מאות אנשים, המון המון, עולים ועולים ועולים, ותכף נתנו לנו את המקום שלנו, וכל הקבוצה שלנו צופפו אותנו כמו סרדינים. אחד על יד השני, צפוף, צפוף, כשאי אפשר היה להסתובב ממש, ואי אפשר היה לשבת.
It took us all day to load the ship. We loaded 4,554 people.
When the British Foreign Minister, Ernest Bevin, was alerted to the boarding, he exhorted his French counterpart, Georges Bidault, to impound the warfield.
Bevin was determined to break this blockade-running business.
The harbor at Sète was a maze of breakwaters, making it all but impossible for the President Warfield to move without tugboats.
We were supposed to get a tugboat to take us out, and the British were putting pressure on the French not to give us a tugboat. We didn't get the tugboat.
And the French had given in finally, and they had decided that by July 10th at midnight, if we did not leave by then, the Warfield would not leave France anymore. So we had to race against time, against the clock.
Time was running out. There was only food and water for a 7-day voyage. If the Warfield did not escape during the night, the voyage would be doomed.
We had to leave port under our own power and twist and turn. It was a very, very narrow channels, and it's very difficult to turn a ship, 330-foot ship, in those close quarters. But we managed to do it.
והרגשתי שאני לא בודדה, שפתאום אני כל כך הרבה אנשים, וכולם יהודים, וכולם רוצים אותו הדבר, כולם רוצים להגיע לארץ ישראל.
We danced on the different decks, and there was music, and there was laughing, there was even flirting, there was everything on these ships.
But as dawn broke, they saw British destroyers on the horizon.
The minute we left Set, we already had several ships, British naval ships waiting for us, and they were trailing us all along the way.
Ronald Bundle was an officer on one of the British ships that shadowed the warfield.
I was on board HMS Checkers. I was one of the lieutenants on board. We used to anchor off and patrol up and down the coast, mostly at night time, to intercept any illegal immigrant boats coming in.
The British Navy's plan was to trail the warfield across the Mediterranean and board her when she reached Palestinian waters. The British had successfully trailed, captured, and detained dozens of smaller ships.
I mean, for us, it was just another ship that came in with a whole lot of Jewish immigrants. It was a big one. Okay, end of story as far as we were concerned.
The British broadcast warnings. If the warfield did not turn back, she would be boarded and seized.
We had seen these guys. They had been following us for 4 days, 5 days, and they had some big, big vessels. These were warships. I was scared. I was scared.
Dear Mo, chances are very slim as far as getting through the English are concerned. I don't know if I'll be able to mail any letter in my next port, so don't worry if you don't hear from me for a few weeks. Regards, Bill.
July 16th. 3 more destroyers joined the chase. The warfield received coded instructions from Haganah headquarters in Palestine. Captain Ike briefed the crew. They were instructed to outrun the British escort and beach the ship in downtown Tel Aviv.
The drill was that we were going to get as close to the shore as possible and run the ship up on the shore.
We went southeasterly direction till we came just north of the Egyptian coast. In fact, the British thought that we were going to land on a mud bar down there. We came so close in.
July 7th.